All right, everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Georgia Track and Field and Cross Country Coaching Collective podcast. I'm Andy Christie, and I'm joined here by Coach Chris Mayer of Athens Academy. And we're excited to kind of break down the end of the cross country season. We know it's been over a month since the state meet, but there were various postseason races that wrapped up, and so figured we'd wait until everything was wrapped up before we kind of recap some things. Real quick, the collective's website is georgiatfxccollective.com. If you want to check out what we have on there, we have a link to our YouTube channel, other podcasts we've done, other interviews we've done, some documents that coaches have submitted for various things in cross country and track, whether it's websites or how to start up a booster club, how to organize your team for taking roll every day, just various things that we figured could help coaches out. And you can also find us on Instagram and Twitter. So with that in mind, our plan is to start at 7A and work our way down the different classifications. If we don't mention your team or program, that's in no way a slight. We knew that we could easily have a hour plus podcast. We love talking about cross country, but we obviously don't want to do that for you, the viewer slash listener. So we've just picked a few highlights per classification of things that stood out to us, and then we'll work our way through the different classifications. So starting off with class 7A boys. Coach Mayer, you want to kick it off for us?
Yeah. Harrison pulls it off with the young team. They look strong kind of coming out in August, and two ninth graders who are immediate impactful people, and boy were they. And it's hard to kind of carry the team from August all the way to November in the classification as deep as 7A, but they did it. I think all of their top five return, if not more than the top five. I didn't look deeper than that. Denmark, I think, had a sneaky good season, running their best at the end. Their 1-2 punch, I think, was a little inconsistent from time to time. Looked like the dominant 1-2 punch that they were at the state meet a couple of times, but they weren't always side by side, and they ended up finishing back to back. I think they were 4th and 5th at the state meet. That was huge. Maneshi from Walton. I'm not sure if we can call him a surprise winner. He was a surprise to me. Maybe it was just a case of having 7, 8, 9 guys in the race that could have potentially won, and he had the best day. Maybe he was overlooked. Maybe he was underrated. But looking at his stats, he had an amazing 2023 track season. He was a top 10 guy in 2022 of cross country. So maybe just me being a little out of touch with 7A, I kind of overlooked him, but kudos to him.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, he was certainly a contender, but I don't know how many people would have picked him as their favorite going into the meet. Good season, ran some great times leading up to it, but he was one of many people who could have won. And he runs 15:43 for the win. I don't know, and I've talked to other coaches about this as well. I don't know that I've ever seen that many guys still in it with 600 to go.
It was crazy.
Yeah, on just a huge packs on the band field, and yeah, just a lot of people still in it late in the race. Denmark, yeah, I knew they'd be a podium team, but to finish as the runner up and closer to Harrison than maybe would have been predicted. But like you said, kudos to Harrison for hanging on for the victory. And then Marietta doing Marietta things. I mean, losing a bunch of guys off their state champ team. I think they spent most of the season ranked around 8th, 9th, 10th, and then of course they come in and get third.
I got to see Jack at his tent afterwards, and he was all by himself. I don't know where everybody else was, but he was just sitting there kind of shaking his head. The boys surprised even him, which is not an easy task.
Right.
That they did that.
Yeah, and I think it was both a surprise and well, it's Marietta and Jack Coleman, so there you go. For at least the rest of us watching. Um, all right, 7A girls. What do you think about that class?
Yeah, I think finishing up with the it's Marietta doing Marietta things is a nice transition to the 7A girls. I mean, are we surprised what these girls have been doing the last few seasons? Uh, they put 5 in the top 12, which is just absolutely insane. All I've really got is it's a testament to what Jack Coleman and his fellow coaches have been growing over there at Marietta, and the girls have been on quite a tear.
Absolutely. I mean, they already had a great staff with Coach Coleman, Coach Ravenscraft, and now I've added Coach Gambrell. So it's just a crazy talented coaching staff. But yeah, to dominate, and I think they took to heart maybe some of the mile split postings of not as dominant, and they certainly were at at state. Nesmith ends up winning, going 18-15, and pretty much running her own race, just kind of out there for the majority of the race. Really smart pacing. But yeah, not a whole lot of surprises team wise in there. In terms of, I mean, Marriott obviously was going to win, but then it was pretty much as predicted going in. Although kudos to Richmond Hill, who was a close fifth place. Um, but yeah, the predictions kind of held true in the girls 7A race. So not as many surprises or drama, I guess.
Which I
Uh,
think tends to be the case in the girls' races at the state meet. I don't know if you know. I feel like they're a little more predictable.
any reasoning why you think that might happen?
I'll let you know when I figure it out. There
Could be
seems
one
to
of
be
those.
less drama.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're going to see as you guys listening, watching, you're going to see as we talk through this. There's going to be some surprises, but then there's also going to be people that held serve, kind of just finished where they were predicted to finish, and it's kind of interesting to see the differences. Um, all right, 6A boys.
Yeah. Tommy Latham and the Marist boys, I think they handled their business, but I'm not sure that it was an easy task. There was some speculation that maybe I read or heard something where Tommy maybe held back at the state meet so he can have that big run at Nike. But I'll tell you what, I was at the finish chute, at the road there on Ben Scott Boulevard when he crossed that finish line. We had just finished up our awards, and he looked pretty tired. I think he wanted that performance of the day, and conditions had started to deteriorate. And if you look through the results, the Marist boys didn't have a perfect day. I think they had to run as hard as they could have because Blessed Trinity was a worthy, foe. Um, but it was enough. It was enough to win. And good for them. They did rebound really well for Nike. I mean, 10th place for that boys team at NXR. And Tommy, I think he fourth at NXR. He might have done better, but went on to do what 15th at
15th, yeah.
yeah 15th at nationals. Really impressive for him. Only a junior, so can't wait to see what's next for him.
Yeah, I mean, 1557 at Carrollton. I mean, yes, there were some changes to the course. You can debate those, but to do that on a day when, like you said, he maybe had to, run in warmer weather, maybe didn't feel his best. Who knows what his strategy was coming in, but he got the job done. But then goes on to, if there was anybody doubting him after that state meet performance, they certainly weren't a few weeks later when he drops the 1447 at NXR and then the 15th at nationals. Um, and then, yeah, like you said, BT, I think, and certainly they would have liked to finish one place higher, but great team. And I think about, they certainly put themselves in there with some of the best teams that finished second at state. For people that have been around a while, I think about the 2010 Parkview team who finished second to Brookwood, but then only missed out on Nike Nationals by, I want to say, 5 points or something ridiculous like that. So anyway, kudos to
It's
BT.
it's tough being in a race or a classification where, second place can only feel like losing. I've been there with several Lovett teams, and you just got to kind of keep it in perspective. And that's a really, really good Marist team that the BT guys were up against.
Yes, absolutely. All right, 6A girls.
My big takeaway from this one is Caitlin Dollar. Impressive career, impressive progression. But again, just after that boys race where we're saying course conditions were deteriorating, she pops a 17:49 course record on the current layout as we know it. Again, we're kind of talking about, that's a moving target somewhat, but 28 seconds under Serena Tripodi's 18-17. She's had a really solid senior campaign, kind of quietly doing it. I don't know that she got as much attention as she deserved with some of her senior times and even her junior track season. I wonder why there was no postseason race. Certainly had a great shot at qualifying for something like Foot Locker or Nike. But what I look forward to is what she'll do on the track. I wonder where she's going to commit. Ruby Little ran 18:08 and hung tough. I mean, second fastest performance of the day. And your second second place in your race. So that's what I took away. Was just Caitlin Dollar's super, super impressive performance.
Definitely. I think, in the team race, you had the usual suspects. Marist won, Pius was second. So no real big surprises there. But yeah, Caitlin Dollar, tremendous run. She talked at the All Metro banquet about cross training a lot, way more than she would have wanted to. So maybe that's why she didn't do post race season races. I don't know. That's pure speculation. But to cross train and several days a week, whatever she did, and to then do that kind of performance is just outstanding. Kind of shades of Parker Valby a little bit, which is and like you said, Ruby Little finishing second with the time that she ran. Great duel between those two for sure in a later race at state. All right, 5A boys.
All right. Again, I'm going to harp on more of the team race in this one in a second, but first off, Jacob Pullen is the real deal. I'm not sure that his stats from last spring would have indicated the kind of cross-country season he's had. He did pop a 4:26 and a 9:37, so kind of take what I'm saying there with a grain of salt, but he's had an outstanding senior campaign. Ultimately, culminating in winning a very tough battle down the stretch in the 5A state championship. The boys teams absolutely sent it in this classification. I think in terms of like what the rest of their season looked like, I think Chattahoochee was the favorite kind of all along, but Jefferson made it super close. They ran faster than their team averages at Wingfoot and at Coach Wood. Clark Central, I don't know if anybody could have predicted the kind of race that they put together. I think it would have been kind of one of the most thrilling races to have watched from the whole weekend. Just not knowing what was gonna happen. I would have thought that Chattahoochee was gonna run away with it, but it was super, super close. And there were teams that just ran out of their minds trying to kind of steal the state title.
Yeah, I was looking at the team scores again because there was only 25 points separating the top four. And here were the team scores: 92, 99, 109, 117. So you're talking about one person, doesn't maybe have as good of a last mile or last thousand, here and there, and maybe there's some different orders to the trophies. Pullen, I have to admit he wasn't really on my radar as much until ASICS, and then when I saw his second place finish at ASICS, that certainly got my attention. And then to win the state title was impressive. But then kudos to Coach Mike Morris and Chattahoochee for hanging on and getting the victory. Again, with that 7-point differential, which they needed, they needed every bit they got from their boys. 5A girls.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with Sanam Rangari. I think I'm saying that right. So Sanam is another one of those athletes that I think, based off of her previous track season and even just her progression, from August to November, she was a just inside of 20-minute runner that became a mid-18s runner on the state course. Amazing progression, kind of just an unexpected victor there. And the Decatur girls just did their thing. I think they were a super strong team all season. Big meets, mixing it up, finishing high. I think they were 4th at Coach Wood. So they, showed up and did their thing.
Yeah, 54-76. They won over McIntosh. So congrats to the Decatur girls. The other thing that stood out to me was Chattahoochee girls got on the podium. So both boys and girls got on the podium, and the girls, it was by 2 points that they got that fourth place trophy. So again, kudos to Coach Morris. 4A boys.
I think this was a tough classification, and Westminster was, far and away the favorite. This is one of the most, I think, kind of dominant and maybe the best Westminster team in school history. Again, my time at Lovett, the number of times that I've been able to say in the last decade, now 11 years, is this the best boys Westminster team ever? I think 6 or 7 times in the last 11 years. So it might be taboo to celebrate and harp on a Westminster team, but I'm going to do it. This team is incredible, and what Coach Tribble has done over his career, and specifically the last 5, 6, 7 years, these teams rise to the challenge of what the rest of the state is doing, and they've remained kind of a relevant top 5 all classification team, led by Joseph Jacot, who was hurt most of the year. He made his debut at Coach Wood running the 1530s, and then what he did at state was incredible. He ran 1530, just torched the field at halfway, or maybe even just before halfway, maybe around the band field separation slope the first time. I thought everybody else was just blowing up, because again, it was one of those races where course conditions were starting to kind of fall apart. But no, it was just how well he was running. Estefan, his teammate, breaking 16 and just not even being able to sniff his teammate for half of the race. Just what a performance. So I'm just kind of blown away by what Jacko did. Not the best race, of the season, I think, for the Westminster boys at the state meet, but they did what they had to do to win the race. They had 4 pretty dominating performances. Their 5th man was a little back, but anyway, great team. Really impressive what they've been able to do. I think that's the story from 4A for me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they won with 43 points, and I think their journey to that day was not the easiest, and not what they would have predicted it would have been. Certainly not with Joseph's injury that he had to deal with. But that's what's great about state. As you know, it doesn't necessarily take your A+ day to get the job done. And usually it's a hero that, or sometimes it could be a hero that maybe it's a B+ day for them, or even worse, but they gather their resolve and are heroic that last little bit, maybe up the last hill, and get the job done at Carrollton. But Westminster boys bring home another state title. I think they said All Metro that was Coach Tribble's 30th, which, yeah. So congratulations to them for sure.
I'll add that Joseph's time, that 15:30 and change, is just a hair off of Kamari Miller's 15:29 record of what we think of the current rendition of Carrollton, and is inside of Graham Blanks's 15:33, just to put it into perspective.
Got it. All right, so let's see, we're at 4A girls now.
Yes. So obviously the big surprise here was Caroline Hood, heavy favorite coming in. And I think what we learned from this is that Carrollton can get the best of even the best runners. We've seen it happen time and time again if an effort isn't super calculated. And I'm sure Caroline had a record on her mind maybe, and yeah, it just didn't go her way. Luckily, she did still get across that finish line and helped her team to the state title that they were supposed to get in dominating fashion, which they did. And then yeah, she rebounded and made it to Nike, which I think is something that she's been looking to try to do for the last 3 seasons, is to get that national qualifier. So good for her to finally get that.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, persevering even when you don't have your best day. And they still won with 28 points. So it was still a good day for Pace, to say the least. And then to get to go to Nike Nationals, like you said, which is an amazing experience, or so I've heard. I know you've had the good fortune to be able to have an athlete qualify, and I've heard the stories about. I've seen all the pictures of all the things that Nike does for the athletes. It just looks like a tremendous experience for somebody to finish their senior year with.
You can't go wrong there, and I think this is the first year that the Southeast has actually had the ability to do both races, both regional races. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure, because historically our athletes have had to choose, because the Nike regional and the Foot Locker regional fell on the same day, where that's not the case in the rest of the country. So so that creates some options and opportunities for our athletes that weren't there before. But with that being said, it also has made each regional, I think, stronger, because it didn't split the competition. You can look at it that way.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to 3A boys.
Let's see. So Oconee boys are just too strong. Their second title in as many years. Cooper Timmerman, not necessarily a surprise winner. Aaron Broderick, we know, maybe had a little bit of something going on in the middle of the season, returned and ended up third. But Cooper really had a tremendous second half to his season. Impressive win over Woodmore, who has burst onto the scene after last track season. Yeah, that's what I've got.
Yeah, I spent a lot of the season thinking Woodmore was a senior, and at some point realized, oh wait, he's got another year, which is, yeah, pretty impressive. He's set himself up for a great junior track season, and then next year. Oconee County, like you said, they still, even if they had some injuries they were dealing with, still put 4 in the top 10, 40 points. So put an exclamation point on yet another season to win another title, for Coach Houghton. And then there was 8 points from second to fourth, which was pretty impressive. That stood out to me as well, with Lumpkin getting second, Hebron third, Wesley in fourth. So Oconee was doing their thing up front, but then big battle for the rest of the podium spots. 3A girls.
Let's see. Wesleyan girls with a team that could maybe win for years to come. We've seen this before. We might be seeing it again. Young Wheezy, I'm going to call her Young Wheezy Moore. with the state title and a bright future. Maybe having Big Brother on the team has helped her kind of gain some confidence and find her way. But another one of those athletes that I keep kind of harping on the previous track season. She was a 2:43 and a 6:17 runner last spring, for what it's worth, and became a 1940 cross country runner this fall, and a state champion. So probably a bright future there for Wheezy and the rest of the Wesleyan girls as we go into this era of single A through 3A private competing against each other.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to the Moore family for having a pretty incredible fall. 34 points for the Wesleyan girls, so a dominant performance for them. Oconee getting third, so they got a double podium finish that day. So some great performances in girls 3A. All right, so next is 2A boys.
Yeah, so Providence boys ran with a little extra that day. That's my classification now at Athens Academy, and I'll tell you that our guys knew what was at stake that day, and state titles didn't come our way very often, but Providence ran with a little extra. Their first title in school history, and Coach Steven Spivacek and others, I think, clearly reminded those guys of what they were capable of, and they were peaking at the right time. Great race at state. Yeah, that's just hats off to them.
Absolutely. I mean, 10-point difference, so not many, points. Sorry, I'm not trying to twist the knife in, coach. But kudos to them, like you said. Coach Spivacek was a Parkview runner back in the day on that 2010 team that I mentioned previously, actually. And then went on to run for UGA, but he ran for Coach Tig at Parkview, and now back, in his second year, I believe, at Providence, and winning a state title. So kudos to them for bringing home that first one in school history. All right, next is 2A girls.
Yeah, so Athens Academy girls, heavy favorites. We kind of took care of business. Look out for Maya Davis. Big win at the state meet level, but even bigger performance at Foot Locker at the end of the year. Got that sub 18, ran 17:55, was the top Georgian, has really solid track accolades. I think that our Athens Academy girls could be really competitive in the new single A through AAA private division. Yeah, that's not to toot our own horn there. That's really hard to kind of talk about your own classification in school. But that's kind of the recap that we've got from there.
Yeah, 45-second win for her at state. So yeah, it's well deserved to point out the kind of season that y'all's girls had. All right, Class A Division II boys.
So I've kind of lumped Division II, single A Division II into like one statement. So if you want to kind of talk about them separately and lead us
We
off.
can do boys and girls together because it's fitting with what I think you're about to say. Yeah.
So this is kind of just to Logan Voppel, what he's kind of done. He's had an interesting journey, I think, in the sport and getting into coaching. Super nice guy. This is about sweat equity, I think. To bring a program like Atlanta Classical, back-to-back titles, I think, for the girls, correct?
Yes.
And then to double up this year for boys and girls. I've seen him out at the river and sometimes waiting on, one athlete, and maybe they don't show, or just showing up and nobody shows. And it's not like coaching a program where you can expect 15, 20 or more runners at a summer practice. So a lot of TLC goes into a small program like that. And I think that's a huge testament to what Logan's putting in to bring this program to the top.
Absolutely. I mean, their boys were third last year and then get the win this year. Like you mentioned, girls going back to back. I think Coach Vaupel started or worked a year with Coach Tribble at Westminster. Can't ask for much better of a mentor in the sport than him. And I got to know him when he was at Peachtree Ridge for a couple years, and now at Atlanta Classical. And yeah, hats off to him and their program, and the boys following in the footsteps of the girls, and uh, both winning, both getting that first place trophy. Um, Class A Division I boys.
Yeah, the Whitfield boys have just been on a tear. They're really good. If you consider sort of that program and its size, the cream is rising to the top there. They're working hard and they're very talented. They've had really good runners kind of for a little while, the last decade or so. They've had an athlete make it to the highest ranks. But recently they've found depth that they've never had before. I think they're probably the team to look out for in the single A through AAA private division in 2024.
Yes, Whitfield over a good Paideia team who had some great performances this year as well. But like you said, definitely a team to be watching for future years. Class A Division I girls.
Yeah, Bleckley County, kind of no surprise here. Nothing but respect for that program. Coaches and the kids have always been so awesome and respectful and competitive. They want to win and they're gonna race their hardest. But they're gonna shake your hand and look you in the eye afterwards. And Ella Gibbs is an absolute force. She ran an awesome race at state. They bring at least their entire top 5 girls back next year. I don't know where they'll end up classification wise. Actually, this is my fault. My head's kind of been in the sand about this stuff as of late. But I think they're a program that thrives with deeper competition. So I hope they get that, because that program, I think they've got a lot to kind of go after.
Yeah, I mean, the job that Coach Shelley Cranford has done over the years, I mean, the list of state title teams and awesome individuals in a part of the state that, before he kind of emerged on the scene, wasn't necessarily getting a lot of attention, and he certainly has changed that with the job that he has done.
Is it crazy to compare him to a Joe Tribble?
I don't think so. I mean, in terms of
Either.
there's so many scales of success that you can use to measure people, and I love that about our sport. That and there's maybe even other people that we're not mentioning, that maybe there's somebody that finished 9th or 10th or 15th at state, but with the athletes they had and the situation they were in, that was an incredible performance for their program. But certainly, Coach Cranford, like yes, like I said, just finding success in an area that maybe distance running, I'm assuming distance running was not maybe embraced until he, or at least not to the extent that he has certainly taken it to, or the level that he's taken it to at this point.
I agree.
All right, so that's the classifications. We're going to do a quick kind of sidebar about reclassification, since you've mentioned that a couple of times, because it's an important thing that's coming up here. So some highlights: no more 7A. It's just going to be renamed 6A. The highest class is 6A, but it's getting 19 schools added to it from what we have now. So about mid 60s from mid 40s, which is interesting. But then the biggest change is what you've already mentioned, that there's going to be a class A through 3A private school division racing each other. We don't know all the details yet in terms of state qualification, that sort of thing. But We do know that in Class 4A, there's going to be a huge showdown between Pius, Marist, BT, Pace, and Westminster. I don't know if I'm accidentally leaving somebody out, but that's enough. But
Yeah.
just those schools plus all the other, public school strong programs. Any words on any of that
Uh,
information?
well, I've already said I've kind of had my head in the sand a little more than I normally would. Um, but I think the greatest question mark is how we're going to handle state qualifiers. I think it was made clear that, the GHSA wanted regions to still be private and public combined. There's talk of a sectional. I think that single A through triple A, the state qualification is kind of the biggest concern and question mark that we still have. Um, Beyond that, it's cool that some of the private schools opted to play up and got approved, especially the likes of the ones that you've already mentioned. I think, like, in my opinion, it looks like they kind of banded together and said, well, we're going to push up and we should be competing against higher classification schools. And we can do that, so we will. Um, so I think good move on their part. In terms of eliminating 7A, I think 7A was working fine as a classification, but the adding of 7A, I don't know how many years ago that was. It came with so many other really convoluted changes to the rest of the system. Adding 7A, I think, came along with the split of single A and single A private. Um, our state's big. Our state is really competitive in a lot of sports, but it's really competitive in cross country and track, in my opinion. So it makes sense to have a lot of classifications, but at the same time, maybe it's good to kind of start winding back on it, and competition breeds competition, to quote Ryan McClay. So I think people shouldn't be afraid of being left out for a state competition. People shouldn't be afraid of being left off a podium. It's okay, right? Competition will breed competition, and I've harped on Westminster already. I would bet that they're a team that will figure it out if they were pushed up to 7A. And there's a number of other teams out there and programs out there that will figure it out because they have to. So
Yeah, I
long
agree.
response.
I agree. I mean, I think it's there's going to be new regions of death. There's going to be
Oh,
new
yeah.
classifications that's really hard to make the podium. But then I think you'll see some redemption stories, for lack of a better word, in terms of maybe schools that are on the outside looking in one year and then they find a way to get the job done the next year. I think it's good instead of a region meet where maybe there's only 4 schools in the region or 5 schools in the region. I think it's good to go through the ringer a little bit to get to the state meet. But in terms of that's another soapbox that I maybe could get on, but I'll reel myself back in. But for reclassification, it's just interesting seeing some of the new matchups that we'll have, teams that maybe haven't typically gone up against each other at Carrollton in November, that they'll now have some new rivalries, maybe, or at least some new state meet rivalries, not just the invitationals throughout the year. Um, but I too am curious to see what happens with the state qualifying process whenever that comes to light. Last thing that we'll end with is a big one. Graham Blanks,
Yeah.
uh, tremendous job at the NCAA meet. Um, you first. Go ahead and tell me your thoughts
Well,
on
I
that
mean,
race.
okay, so first, Georgia athlete to have accomplished this. To my knowledge, Joe Thorne is the next closest, and he was what, ninth or something.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
When he was a true sophomore, I believe, at Texas. Maybe he was a redshirt sophomore, but um, so for me, I mean, I'm closer to the story than I ever would have expected. Having ended up at Athens Academy, I'm getting to talk to Coach Jeffrey Walton and Neville Anderson, and they're talking about hanging out with him at Waffle House and how he kind of spoke this into existence in July. He's like, well, what have you and Gibby been working on? And they're, at Wisco, they're saying, yeah, that's what he said he was going to do. He was going to just drop the hammer and run away from everybody. And um, putting it more eloquently than that. But the goal was, in July was he wanted to win everything, and he's still saying that and holding true. So it's cool for me to kind of get to be somewhat on the inside of some of these stories now. How amazing is it to have a kid from our home state, win that race? And not only that, but the first American under the age of 22 since Dathan Ritzenhein, joins just an incredible list of American runners, and not only just NCAA champions. First Ivy man to do it. Not first Ivy. Let's make it clear, right? Abby D was the first there.
Yeah.
But just to whatever, see his progression, and he was a stud in high school, but again, knowing his story and knowing his training background and where he came from, and how awesome. I don't know how else to put it.
I mean, watching that that race, and first of all, I love watching it.
Makes your hairs stand up. That whole race, just knowing we had a kid in it.
And I just love that race, the way the production value, the scores on the screen. I mean, that to me, that's just a cross country coach's dream, is watching the scores as they go through, each K. And so anyway, love that. Shout out to ESPN for the coverage there. But watching him, and I love that he went with 1,000 to go. I love that. I mean, he was smart early. He just kept moving up in terms of, staying in contact. But I love that he went with 1,000 to go, and it wasn't a crazy move, but it was just squeezing down the trigger. And he'll say, and I listened to some post-race interviews and podcasts with him, the Let's Run podcast. I definitely recommend, because they kind of did a deep dive with him. But he'll say he doesn't have the wheels maybe that other people in that race do. He still has some wheels. I mean, 1303.
He's being modest. His
yeah.
wheels have been developed pretty dang well.
Yeah. But having said that, I mean, he's a strength guy, and you run enough miles, you get some speed. And I'd love, and yeah, maybe the gap closed down a little bit there, but it was too late. He had already established that move with 1,000 to go, and I love that. I love that kind of move. That's just something that I loved watching. Love that it's a Georgia boy. That some of these runners that are in high school now, maybe we'll see that and think like, this is not crazy for somebody from Georgia to go and do well on the national level. I just love that example. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's incredible, and he. I was worried watching the race for the exact reason that he, kind of said in the interview immediately after. One, I was more confident in him because of the way he was responding to every move. I was like, he's the only guy who's going with everything. But that same exact reason is kind of what scared me. I was like, well, when is one move, too many? One move too many. Yeah, well, and then to come back and do what he did, at BU and set the NCAA 5K record, it was just the hype was there. The race was set up with that in mind. But sub 13 was in the tank. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it didn't seem like it was. He had some traffic to deal with, and he kind of waited around in the same manner, like until he was ready to go and never look back. But um, whatever, just how cool.
I love that. I forget if it was Let's Run or somebody else that asked him if he was going to do an internship next summer, and he said, "No, I'm trying to qualify for the Olympics." And if there's ever a reason to not be an intern, that is it. I think
It works out. Yeah, that's
that's a good reason. So yeah, kudos to you, Grand Blanks. Thanks for repping Georgia so well for us. Um, all right, well that wraps up this edition. We're excited to move on to track in the spring, but please check out us on social media at Georgia TFXC, coachingcollective.com. Um, all the different all the different ways that you can get involved with us. We love contributions. We just obviously are passionate about this stuff, so happy to be able to talk about it. Coach Mayer, thanks as always.
Thank you. Glad I'm finally jumping on this thing.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. Um, and best of luck to everybody in the upcoming track season.